Salam everyone. So in this lecture, we're going to explore an important area of the Quran itself. In other words, a simple question, but a very, very important question. The question is, why did people ask the Prophet to change the Quran or bring some other text, right? But do not recite the Quran to the people. So again, why, right? This is the question. So to explore this question, there are a few things within Surah Yunus, which is chapter 10 of the Quran. We are going to explore and unpick verses 1 through 20. And you'll notice that as we read through the context, and when we come towards verse 15 and onwards, towards the end of this particular context or contextual paragraph, verses 1 to 20, you will understand that why people ask the Prophet to change the Quran. So we'll also explore, as point number 3 on the agenda here, the definition of intellect, the definition of reason, which is point 4, and then of course we'll conclude, and then you will have a better judgment of why the people asked the Prophet to change the Quran. Because if the Quran was sent down as guidance, right, for the Prophet, people didn't really accept it, right? The community of the Prophet, the Arabs of that time, they didn't really like what was being recited to them. All right? So we need to understand why the people didn't like the Quran, right? Today, if you ask all Muslims, for example, of course, we love the Quran, we believe in the Quran, and we follow the Quran. But at that point in time, people didn't really like the Quran, right? So let's explore why did people ask the Prophet to change the Quran. So we'll start off with the meaning of the root word, which is ʿaqalu, ʿayn, qaf, lam, which is EQL, and that's the basis of this entire context, verses 1 through verse 20. So before I actually jump into the actual verses, let's first take a look at the root word in the Quran, ʿayn, qaf, lam, and that's used several times in the Quran. So I'm going to navigate to the actual root word here. So this root, EQL or ʿayn, qaf, lam, occurs about 49 times in the Quran. Okay? So the Quran, in fact, uses this word quite a bit in different contexts, in different verses. So in different chapters, different surahs, right? So chapter 2, which is Surah Al-Baqarah, this word is used several times. In chapter 3, chapter 5, chapter 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, chapter 13, chapter 16, chapter 21, 23, 24, 28, 29, 30, 36, and continues on to 40, 43, right? 57. So the pattern that we see here, that this particular word is pretty much spread in about more than half of the Quran, right? In different chapters, almost, several times. So this word, the ʿayn, qaf, lam, right? The EQL word, ʿaqalu. Let's explore the meaning of it, right? And then we'll go to our Surah Yunus, chapter 1, or chapter 10 rather, verse 1 through 20, to explore why people asked the Prophet to change the Quran, right? All right, great. So now that we know that this word occurs 49 times in the Quran, right? And by the look of it, you can see the meaning, the typical meaning is used as reason or intellect, okay? Understanding, logic, and so forth, okay? So these are the basis or the basic meaning of the word. But let's explore the actual root word. What does it mean? So I'm going to navigate to the Edward Lane, the Arabic lexicon, and I'm going to bring up the root word here. Here it is, ʿayn, qaf, lam. I'm going to provide this link in the description, so if you need to explore the actual root word further for yourself, I'd be happy to provide this in the description. All right. And if you have downloaded the PDF, by the way, the ṟayn lexicon, this is in book 1 and then page 2113, the word EQL, ʿaqal. Okay. So if you have this in the PDF format, you can open this up and take a look at the same thing. But so the same PDF is available online, which I'm demonstrating here, and of course you can bring this up by this URL. All right. So the meaning of the root word signifies, right? What does it signify? It's the act of withholding or restraining. Of course, there are many synonyms. Arabic language, or especially the Quranic Arabic language, is a much simpler language. Okay, but it has, of course, synonyms and different ways the actual word is used. So this is a fairly large meaning of the words, or different meanings and different form type. But I'm going to explore the important ones, and you can take a look at the rest, just so that you get a better idea of what does the word mean, reasoning or intelligence, right? All right, so it signifies the act of withholding or restraining. Okay, the question is restraining from what? Okay, so we'll take a look at that as we move forward. So this is the primary signification, or it may be from what next follows. All right, so for example, ʿaqal, right? He bound the camel with a rope called ʿaqal. So when you bound the camel itself, the Arab people, they use ʿaqal. That's what it's called, right? Meaning he bound the camel's foreshank to his arm. He folded together the camel's foreshank and his arm and bound them both in the middle of the arm with a rope called ʿaqal. It also signifies, for example, again moving forward, the she camel was bound by the ʿaqal. And take a look at this. So I'm going to scroll down, apart from other meanings relevant to our own context here. All right, so let's go down here. All right, there we go. So this is another meaning of the word. He withheld him or restrained him from the object of his want, right? And hajat. So if you restrain someone from the object of his want, that's also one of the synonyms or one of the meanings of this word. Moving forward, the medicine bound or confined his belly or bowels, right? So that's, again, a holding place, something to confine to, constrain. All right, great. Moving forward, once again, the bound with a rope called ʿaqal, the camel, right? On the authority of, and so on. All right, so I'm going to scroll down, moving forward. Here's another context. She combed her hair or combed it in a certain manner, right? As also ዐqalatu, right? So in other words, it's a certain pattern, certain way, a logical way of combing, your hair, for example. That's what it says. She combed her hair or combed it in a certain manner. So in a logical manner, you follow things. You try to understand things based on facts and so forth, evidence and so on. All right, so he was or became, that is, intelligent. That's also called aqil, as though he were withheld or restrained from doing that which is not suitable or befitting. So once again, you become intelligent. You say, well, this guy is intelligent. Why is he intelligent? As though he were withheld or restrained from doing that which is not suitable or befitting. In other words, right, not following your wants or vain desires or wishes. You need to actually take a look at the logic, right, the evidence, the facts, before you become, you're known as intelligent person. Great. So it signifies the same, or he possessed much intelligence, for it is with tashdid to denote muchness. Okay, great. So let's continue on. He understood or knew the thing, as meaning he looked into, considered, examined, or studied the thing repeatedly until he knew it. It's also the dabbara, right? You're actually focusing, right? And aql, right? That's what it signifies. All right, so let's continue on. Scroll down a little bit. All right, so a palm tree that will not receive fecundation is a tropical phrase, right? Aql meaning he understand or he understood a thing. So that's what it means. You understand something based on evidence and logic in a certain manner. All right. It also signifies, right, protecting oneself in a mountain, right? So in other words, not going out of bounds, right? Staying within the actual scope. All right. Let's move forward. Scroll down. So you get the sense so far, right? What we've actually taken a look at this particular word in the Arabic language. So moving forward, ʿaqal qawm, the people or party became in the condition of finding the shade to have declined and contracted or shrunk with them at midday, right? So again, process of restraining, making sure you're within the scope. He found him to be aqil, which means intelligent. Moving forward, take a look at this. It says, a saying heard by us from the Arab of the desert, right? Or means, put thy two hands together for me, and insert thy fingers together, in order that I may put my foot upon them, that is, upon thy hands, and mount my camel, right? So you like interlock your fingers, and someone steps on those fingers to mount the camel. For the camel was standing and was laden, and if he had made him to lie down, would not rise with him on his load. Okay? So what this is basically saying is, listen, if you need to mount a camel, a person needs to stand interlocking the fingers, and you put a step on the fingers, right, on his hands, and then you jump up on the camel. Whereas if the camel were to lie down on the side and the person would sit, the camel would be unable to stand. Okay? So again, logical way. If you need to mount a camel, there's a certain manner you would do so. You can't just, have a camel lie out flat on the belly and then, try to mount, right? So that's what it means. It is used in philosophical works as meaning he conceived it in his mind abstractly and otherwise. And so sometimes, right, aqal. Hence one says, this is a thing that is not conceivable. Haza shay'un la yataqal. So something that you cannot really conceive because it doesn't make sense. So taqal means, hence he recovered his intellect or understanding. Kind of makes sense. If you need to mount a camel, there has to be a certain manner. You can't just do it any other way, right? Maybe you can do it a couple of ways. There's no way you can mount a camel if the camel is laying down sideways on the belly, right? So he affected or endeavored to acquire aql, intelligence. Now scroll down a little bit more so you understand further. But by now you get the real sense of the word aql, right? Which is reasoning, which is intelligence, being intelligent, using logic in a certain manner based on evidence, based on facts, not following your wants or vain desires. Great. So moving forward, he affected or made a show of possessing aql, intelligence, without having, or he was withheld, restrained, or confined. His tongue was withheld or restrained from speaking. He was unable to speak. He put his hind legs of the ewe or she goat between his shank and his thigh to milk her, and so milked her, right? So all of these are sort of like the same meanings of the word aql. Scroll down a little bit further, almost there. The reason I'm kind of spending time here is so that we need to really understand the Quran is using this word several times, and God is instructing us to use aql, okay? Not use our vain desires, not use our wants. To using aql signifies, of course, using your intelligence, using your intellect. There's a process of understanding abstract things, right? And that's exactly what we'll explore once we move forward to our second agenda point, which is reading up the Quran, and why the people, in fact, told the Prophet to change the Quran. All right, great. So let me scroll down further, coming back to this. All right, so let's take a look at this word. Finally, aql, in all its senses, right, as a transitive verb, for example. Hence, it signifies intellectual, as meaning perceived by the intellect, and excogitated, thus applied as an epithet to any branch of knowledge that is not necessarily manqul, which means discerned, such as the science of fundamentals of religion and the like. Hence also intelligible and approved by the intellect or reasonable. Okay? So now that we have a solid understanding of what reason is, what intellect is, what intelligence is, and what the Quran actually signifies. So I'm going to navigate back to all of the instances in the Quran to make it bigger. So 49 times this word is being used to use reason, use intellect, understanding. Okay? So all of these different chapters in the Quran, in fact, the Quran heavily signifies to use reason. We can't just, use our own vain desires, for example, right? In fact, the Quran itself kind of, talks or opposes the concept of using vain desires. We need to reason. We need to focus. We need to have a greater understanding of the Quranic text. All right, great. So let's navigate to our main question and bring up the actual agenda point here. So we explored the meaning of the root word aql in depth, so you have a solid understanding of what that means. Before I go to Surah Yunus verse 1 through 20, let's take a look at quickly. I've listed these definitions. For example, the definition of intellect, right? Which means the faculty of reasoning and understanding objectively. All right? So here's the key word, objectively, not subjectively. So the faculty of reasoning and understanding objectively, especially with regard to abstract or academic matters, is one of the definitions of intellect. Another one is intelligence. On the other hand, intelligence is the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. Intellect is the faculty of objective reasoning and understanding, particularly of abstract concepts. And four, the definition of reason, based on a noun itself, the power of mind to think, understand, and form judgments by a process of logic. All right. So whenever we form a judgment, we don't just use our vain desires or a heart or a want, right? We have to form judgments by a process of logic, and that is called reasoning. Another definition is a cause, explanation, or justification for an action or event. So if you use reason as a verb form, it means think, understand, and form judgments by a process of logic. That's important. And that's exactly what the Quran says when we talk about reasoning, right? Intellect, using logic. Great. So let's move to our chapter 10. I'm going to go through, it's a fairly straightforward run through. And by the end, you will understand why people actually told the Prophet Muhammad, to change the Quran or bring some other text. Okay, great. So, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, the Almighty, the Merciful, Alif Lam Ra. Those are the proofs of the wise law. Tilka ayatul kitab al-hakim. This book is book of wisdom, right? It is a wonder to men that we have instructed a man among them. Warn thou men, and bear thou glad tidings to those who heed warning, that they have a high standing in the sight of their Lord. Those who spurn guidance while claiming virtue say, this is an obvious sorcerer. Verse 3. Your Lord is God, who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, then took his place upon the throne. He directs the matter. There is no intercessor save by his permission. That is God, your Lord, so serve him. Will you then not take heed? Unto him is your return altogether. The promise of God is true. He begins creation, then he repeats it, that he might reward those who heed warning and do deeds of righteousness with equity. And those who are indifferent to warning have a scalding liquid and a painful punishment because of what they deny. Verse 5. He it is who made the sun an illumination and the moon a light, and decreed for its stations, that you might know the number of years and the reckoning. God created that only aright. He sets out the details, the proofs for people who know. Verse 6. In the alteration of night and day, and what God created the heavens and the earth, are proofs for people who are imprudent. Verse 7. Those who look not to the meeting with us, but desire the life of this world, are the rest therein. And those who are heedless of our proofs, these, their habitation is hell for what they earned. Verse 9. Those who heed warning and do deeds of righteousness, their Lord guides them by their faith. There will flow beneath them rivers in the gardens of bliss. Their supplication therein will be, glory be unto thee, God, and their greetings therein will be peace. And the end of their supplication will be, praise belongs to God, the Lord of all mankind. Verse 11. And had God hastened for men the ill as they would hasten the good, for their term would have been concluded. leave thou those who look not to the meeting with us wandering blindly in their inordinacy, right? فَنَظْرُ الَّذِينَ لَا يَرْجُونَ لِقَاءَنَا, right? So leave thou. God is saying to the Prophet, leave those people, right? All right. Continue verse 12. And when affliction touches man, he calls to us on his side, or sitting, or standing. Then when we remove his affliction from him, he passes by as though he had not called to us about an affliction which touched him. Thus is made fair to the committers of excess what they do. And we destroyed the generations before you when they did wrong. And their messengers came to them with clear evidence, but they were not to believe. Thus reward we the evil-doing people. Verse 14. Then we appointed you successors in the earth after, that we might see how you do. Here's verse 15. And when our clear proofs are recited to them, those who look not to the meeting with us say, bring thou a recitation other than this, or change thou it. Say thou, it is not for me to change it of my own accord. So this verse basically is saying, وَإِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُنَا بَيِّنَاتٍ قَالَ الَّذِينَ لَا يَرْجُونَ لِقَاءَنَا بِقُرْآنٍ غَيْرِ هَذَا أَوْ بَدَّلَهُ. Right? So people are saying, when Prophet is reciting the proofs to the people, they're saying, we don't want to hear this Quran, change it. And the Prophet is saying, it is not for me to change the Quran, right? It is not of my own accord. I'm not, saying that out of my own. I'm not making this up, in other words, right? So, but people are not really believing. Prophet, what do you mean you're not making this up? So, of course, there has to be reason for the people to believe that the Prophet is not making this up. And what is that reason? You're going to soon find out in the next verse. So to continue, say thou, it is not for me to change it out of my own accord. I follow only what I'm instructed. And I fear, if I should disobey my Lord, punishment of a tremendous day. Say thou, had God willed, I would not have recited it to you. So the Prophet is kind of justifying, right? He's defending the fact that he's not reciting the Quran out of his own vain desires or own want. But of course, how can he prove it? What is logical? Remember? What is the reasoning? What is the intellect? What is the intelligence? How can he prove that he's not saying things out of his own mouth? That's what people are saying. Change the Quran and do something else. Why are you telling us, all these reciting the Quran all of a sudden? So continue. Verse 16. Say thou, had God willed, I would not have recited it, nor would he have made it known to you. Here's the reason. Here's the logic. فَقَدْ لَبِثْتُ فِيكُمْ عُمْرًا مِّن قَبْلِهِ. And I had tarried among you a lifetime before it. أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Will you then not use reason? Right? ዐقل. So the reason, the logic, Prophet is responding to the people. Listen, I have been living with you for a lifetime. You know me, right? So people knew the Prophet. It's not something new. He didn't come from outside and all of a sudden started to recite the Quran. He lived among the people. He grew up among a community. People knew this guy. People knew this man. It was nothing new. So of course, people knew his routine. People knew he went to the marketplace. He ate food among them. He had friends. He had family, right? So it was not something that he was, imported from anywhere else. That's what the Prophet is saying. And I had tarried among you a lifetime before it. So don't you know me, right? That prior to the Quran, prior to the revelation, I never said a word to you about any of this Quranic recitation. But now, since everything, everything is being revealed to me, I'm reciting this Quran. How can I change it? Right? I cannot change. So this is the logic. This is the reason. This is the evidence. And then God says, of course, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Will you then not use reason? In other words, hey people, why don't you use reason? Okay? Because these are God's proofs and he's not reciting on his own. Here's the reason. He lived among you. You know this guy. It's not something that you don't know. You know where he went to school, for example. You know how he lived his childhood life. You know his uncles, his aunts, and parents and family and everything, right? So use reason. أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Of course, people do not. That's the entire Quranic narrative. Quran tells us to use reason. That's why the word ዐقل, right, the root word ʿayn, qaf, lam, or EQL, is used several times within all of these contexts. I'm going to create maybe another lecture on just the actual word within context. So you will understand that God is actually in different chapters telling people, to use intellect, to use logic, to use evidence. Muslims today and other people today, when they read the Quran, we don't actually use reason. We don't use intellect. We don't, use our understanding of the Quran. We use our desires. We buy stories, right? We go after things that don't make sense, just like the actual definition of the word. In other words, you cannot mount a camel when the camel is laying, on the belly, right? So you gotta have the camel upright, and someone's gotta, you gotta put your foot, two hands, or someone else is gonna help you jump up on the camel, something like that, right? So it has to be a manner, like combing your hair. So similarly, all of these areas within Quran itself, the Quran tells us to use intellect, reason, understanding, and so on. So coming back to our agenda. So we took a look at the meaning of the word in depth, the verses in context, prophet telling the people, hey, I'm not new. You know me, grew up among you, and now that I'm reciting the Quran because it's being revealed to me, use reason, use your intellect, use your understanding. It's logical. It's logic. I'm not making this up, right? That's exactly what the Quran is telling us within these verses. But people saying, change the Quran, change what you're telling us, stop reciting, right? And of course, we know why, because the Quran otherwise tells us why people are adamant to change. Okay, so because they're following the footsteps of their forefathers, there's certain systems, certain traditions, certain customs in place, and all of a sudden, the prophet, who is among the same community of people, he lived his lifetime within the people. All of a sudden, he started to recite something that is different, right? So people, of course, are going to respond negatively to the Quran. Hence, that is the reason why people ask the Prophet to change the Quran or bring some other text, okay? Because people typically follow their vain desires, their wants, and they do not use reason. They do not use intellect. They don't objectively take a look at things, okay? And that's the definition of intellect and reason. So I hope this helps. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. If you have any questions, post within the discussion area below. I'll be happy to kind of take a look at some of your questions if you have any. So once again, like, comment, and subscribe. And with this, Assalamu alaikum.